Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to go ahead and I'm going to get started. So I'm going to hit mute all. So while we start here, can everybody still hear me? Give me a high sign if you can. Okay, lots of nods, so that's good news. And again, if you need to, you can throw a comment in the chat. If you have a comment or a question, you can send it just to me or to everybody. So welcome to our August book chats. We're very glad you're here. And thank you to the Book Sandwiched In Committee for helping to coordinate this. I'm Samantha Stryker. I think I know most of you, but I'm the Community and Adult Services Librarian here. And this program almost was not because our internet was out here at the library until about 15 minutes ago. So we're glad to get back online, and I would have figured something out. But so just a few updates about the library before we get started. We have summer reading going on right now, and I know a lot of you are participating. You can still sign up through, it ends on September 1st. You can still sign up anytime before that. We have real discussions coming up tomorrow evening, and it's all programs right now are still virtual. And then we have our next book discussion will be on September 9th. For anyone interested, we're going to be reading The Library Book by Susan Orlean. So copies are available now at the library if you'd like to participate in that. All of the information about programs is on our website at batavialibrary.org. So you can find everything there. The library's open. I think most of you probably know that, but interlibrary loans are back. We're pretty much back to our normal lending. So if you didn't know any of that, or if you have questions about anything at the library, feel free to let me know. So I am actually the first presenter today, and I am going to present about our 2020 Richmond Reads pick, which is Nothing More Dangerous by Allen Eskens. Has anybody read this yet? Since we announced, yeah. Sue Chitty's on my selection committee, so hopefully she's read it. She said she did, so. So I'm just gonna read a little bit about the book and probably a little passage from the book. Nothing More Dangerous by Allen Eskens is our 2020 Richmond Reads selection, and it was published in 2019. So Richmond Reads is a community one book program where we invite the community to read a book, engage in discussions, and then we'll be hosting the author for a visit in October. Right now we don't know if that will be virtual or in person. He lives in Minnesota, and that's still on our quarantine list, so we'll kind of have to see as we get closer what that's going to look like. So we're kind of just rolling with the punches this year with Richmond Reads. So in addition to Nothing More Dangerous, Allen Eskens is the best-selling author of The Life We Bury, The Guise of Another, The Heavens May Fall, The Deep Dark Ascending, and The Shadows We Hide. He writes mostly mysteries. He began writing Nothing More Dangerous in the early 90s and then set it aside to work on other projects. He finally published it last year, and he describes it as the book that he became a writer to write. He lives in Minnesota with his wife Jolie and recently retired after practicing criminal law for 25 years. Nothing More Dangerous is a mystery and a coming-of-age story that takes place in Jessup, Missouri in the 1970s. The story opens with 15-year-old Bodie Sandin reading about the disappearance of a local African-American woman, Lyda Poe, who keeps the books at the local plastics factory. Lyda has gone missing, along with $100,000, and the town's rumor mill is churning. Bodie would like to disappear himself, feeling tired of his small town and longing for bigger things. Soon, his life is turned upside down when a Black family moves in across the street, and he is forced to examine the world he was raised in. As he investigates the mystery of Lyda's disappearance, Bodie sees the stark lines of race that divide his town, and he is forced to choose sides. So I'm just going to read a little, I'm actually just going to read the opening few paragraphs of the book. It kind of grabs you right from the beginning, and I encourage everybody to read it, but we'll talk more about that after. Chapter 1. I was 15 years old the day I learned that Ms. Lyda Poe had gone missing. Her name meant nothing to me at the time, but I repeated it under my breath just for the way it felt on my tongue. Lyda Poe. It sounded whimsical yet stern, the kind of name that should belong to a saloon keeper or stunt pilot, not someone who scribbled numbers at a plastics factory. Her disappearance was the topic of discussion in my current events class that late spring morning, and I would soon have been lost to my many other distractions had everything else not gone to hell that day. I never really understood the point of that current events class. It went like this. Mrs. Shaw had us read that day's newspaper for the first half of the hour, keeping us busy while she scrolled through her gossip magazines. Then she used the second half of the hour to discuss what we'd read, but those discussions never seemed to dig much past the surface, using a hoe when what you really needed was a shovel. For example, I knew that a guy named Jimmy Carter won a bunch of primaries, surprising everybody, and I knew that President Ford had his hands full trying to beat out an actor named Ronald Reagan for the Republican nomination. But what any of it had to do with the price of a turnip down at the IGA, I couldn't tell you. Ms. Poe wasn't the headline that day. In fact, her story didn't show up until page 3. The headline and most of the front page was devoted to the American Freedom Train, or what we locals called the Bicentennial Train, which stopped in Jessup earlier that week, inviting students from every corner of Cofield County to walk in lockstep through a celebration of the nation's 200th birthday. It was the biggest thing to hit Jessup, Missouri, since the Apollo 11 capsule drove through on the back of a flatbed tractor trailer. So that's just the very few beginning paragraphs, and Alan Eskins kind of sets the scene, sets the timeline, gives us a nice idea of what's going on in Bodie's world at the time, kind of. So the book is a mystery at its heart, but it's also a coming of age story. Excuse me. I think it will appeal to anyone who enjoys fiction in general, and especially anyone who enjoys mysteries. The social issues brought to the forefront are very timely, and the rural setting is very relatable. That was something the committee noted when we were choosing the book, was that it could be Genesee County instead of Cofield County, Missouri. So with that said, copies of the book are available at the library. They're actually all checked out right now, which is a good thing, but you can place it on hold. And it's also available on Overdrive. We have the book in audio and regular print. So that is Nothing More Dangerous. I encourage you all to read it. And we'll be announcing book discussions in October as the author visit gets a little bit closer. So thank you for listening. Let me get my notes here. Up next, we are going to hear from Lucine Kaufman, who is going to talk about the book Stiff by Mary Roach. And Lucine, if you could also talk about what you do at the library as well, just a little. There you go.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I am the library visits coordinator at Richmond Memorial Library, and we deliver library services to seniors in Genesee County who are not able to visit the library. And I have wonderful volunteers. Some of them are listening right now. I won't embarrass you, but we do have about 40 volunteers, and we also deliver large group loans to the senior resident facilities, so like the nursing homes, apartment complexes, etc., throughout Genesee County. So we keep busy, and especially during the pandemic, we're seeing a lot more people interested in the service, which is great. And we've also had quite a few more people interested in volunteering. So we're keeping up, which is the good news. So all you just have to be 60 or over, live in Genesee County, and be unable to travel to the library, whether it's long-term, short-term illness, lack of transportation, a disability. We don't require documentation. So if you just call us and say, I can't make it, we'll deliver. So, on an unrelated topic, I am doing the book Stiff and I love the cover. This is by Mary Roach, and the subtitle is The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers. And it was her first book. It's nonfiction. She published it in 2003. And she details, and I want to emphasize with humor, it's very droll humor, dark humor, the unique scientific contributions of the deceased. And so Mary was raised in New Hampshire, and she graduated from Wesleyan University in Connecticut with a degree in psychology. And after graduating, she moved to San Francisco, where she worked for the San Francisco Zoo, writing about like updates on the animals. And she must have done a great job, because her updates got syndicated and were published in newspapers such as like New York Times, publications like Vogue, National Geographic. And so even though most of her works focus on science, she does not have a formal education in the sciences, but she enjoys it. So given that, what she lacks in formal education, she makes up with firsthand experiences. So she really not only does her research, but she actually would travel to different places in the country and experienced firsthand as much as she could, spending time with cadavers. So she also gives a history of the use of cadavers, and she also explains the surrounding ethical and moral issues. She places each chapter into a historical context by discussing the history of the method of using a cadaver she is about to witness. And I'm going to just read to you this is an odd thing to read from a book. I'm going to read to you the table of contents, because I think that about says it all. So the first chapter is titled, "A Head is a Terrible Thing to Waste." And it's about practicing cosmetic surgery on cadaver heads. And these heads have been embalmed, and they also are used multiple times. So maybe the same head would be used in one class for a nose job. It might be used in another class for a facelift. So they do get multiple uses out of each head. The second, and I'm really just giving you the tip of the iceberg here, and remember, it's all done humorously, but respectfully. The second chapter is Crimes of Anatomy, Body Snatching and Other Sordid Tales from the Dawn of Human Dissection. So we think of body snatching as a Victorian era practice, but it goes back way farther than that. And then Life After Death, on human decay and what can be done about it. So she really gives you a detailed description of the process of what happens to the body chemically after you die. And she does talk about, the interesting thing in this chapter was, even if you are embalmed, your body does eventually decay, especially if moisture gets in, because the water reverses the embalming fluid's effect. So if your grave gets flooded or wet, you will still decompose. Dead Man Driving, Human Crash Test Dummies and the Ghastly Necessary Science of Impact Tolerance. So again, we've seen crash test dummies, but she talks about the tests where they actually do use human cadavers, because the dummies aren't going to bruise, their bones aren't going to break. So they really do need to, you know, in the name of safety, use human cadavers in some instances. Beyond the black box, when the bodies of the passengers must tell the story of a crash. So again, they use human cadavers in simulated flight crashes, and they can tell by the burn patterns on the body, the bruising or the broken bone pattern, the damage, you know, to the skin, and that gives the scientists a better idea of you know, how to make airlines more safe, but it also is used forensically. So if there is an airplane crash, sometimes just you know, inspecting the airplane doesn't tell you enough. So by analyzing the burn marks on the victims, they can tell maybe where the fire originated, because they can place people in the different seats, and they can tell where the fire originated or what the, you know, point of impact was. So that was interesting as well. The cadaver who joined the army. The sticky ethics of bullets and bombs. I think this was my least favorite chapter. Basically, again, using whole cadavers or parts of cadavers to analyze the impact of different ammunition grades and different weapons. And interestingly enough, some countries use it because they want to just be able to stop the enemy, and they don't necessarily want to kill the enemy. So I guess depending on what your army's goal is, to just stop them or to actually kill the enemy, they're going to use a different type of weapon and a different type of ammunition. Okay, holy cadaver. Maybe this was my least favorite one. All the other ones were great. They're all fascinating. And again, she is such a good writer, and she uses, you know, dark humor to liven up the text. This is the crucifixion experiments. So again, scientists have tried to recreate the crucifixion. They've used cadavers to try to figure out what exactly, when you're crucified, what exactly are you dying from? And could nails, could 1/3 inch nails hammered into a palm actually support the weight of an adult male? And so they use different experiments to hammer 1/3 inch nails into different parts of the arm and hand to see what part would actually support the weight of a human body. And then they also used blood flow patterns on crucified cadavers to help try to determine the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. So that's another interesting use of a cadaver. How to know if you're dead. So in this chapter, she talks about, you know, the legal definition of death is when you're brain dead, but you know, especially before, you know, we really came up with that, there was that fear that people were going to be buried alive. And so beating heart cadavers, just also, you know, I'm going to cheat and look at my notes here. just they just talk about also they talk about organ. I guess they don't call it organ harvesting anymore. They call it organ retrieval. And so she also talks about the scientific search for the soul. So a lot of experiments have been done where they weighed a body, before it died and then after it died to see, how much does the soul weigh and where is the soul and what is it? And so that's interesting. And the 9th chapter is Just Ahead: Decapitation, Reanimation, and the Human Head Transplant. This book is not for the faint of heart. Do not read it while you're eating lunch or dinner or breakfast. It has all the gory, if you like gory details, this book has plenty of them. And it talks about different experiments that scientists have tried to graft maybe a dog head onto another dog to see, if this two-headed dog could live, and, just things like that. This chapter also talks about the guillotine and the history of the guillotine. And I guess there was a controversy on like whether the guillotine was instant death or not, and whether the decapitated head could still sense its surroundings with its 5 senses. And that controversy lasted from about the 1700s through the 1800s. And then the 10th chapter is called Eat Me, but Medicinal Cannibalism and the Case of Human Dumplings. And again, mummified cadaver parts. I love Richard laughing over there. I hope nobody's eating lunch right now. Mummified cadaver parts used for medicinal purposes. Sometimes they were marinated in honey, sometimes they were marinated in alcohol, sometimes opiates were added to them. But that went on from really like 20th century Arabia, 16th century China. They published basically recipe books on how to prepare human parts for medicinal purposes, all the way through to 1920s. Soviet scientists tried to do some experiments about cadaver blood transfusions, and that didn't work so well. So and it really was used in Europe, human cadaver parts, through the 18th century in Europe. So that was fairly late. But if you want any recipes, they're in the book. And then new alternatives to burial and cremation. And she calls this one Out of the Fire into the Compost Bin. And that's, just different ways, instead of being embalmed and put in the ground, different ways that they're looking at that are maybe more ecologically sound and safer for the environment, etc. And then the last chapter is Remains of the Author. Will she or won't she? And I'm going to leave that up to you to read it, but I'm going to give you a hint. I just have 2 quotes, very short quotes to end my presentation, and I'm sorry if I went over. One quote is, death, it doesn't have to be boring. Why lie around on your back when you can do something interesting and new, something useful? And then she says, the point is that no matter what you choose to do with your body when you die, it won't ultimately be very appealing. If you are inclined to donate yourself to science, you should not let images of dissection or dismemberment put you off. They are no more or less gruesome, in my opinion, than ordinary decay or the sewing shut of your jaws via your nostrils for a funeral viewing. And I'm going to leave you with that. And it is available in audio on Hoopla. and it's also available at the library. And I believe the e-version's available on one of the formats. So thank you.
Thank you, Lucine. I did learn the hard way with this book that I should turn it off when I'm going through the drive-through line, because I think I scared somebody because they overheard what I was listening to, and it is very detailed. But all right, I'm going to go ahead and mute you again, Lucine. And thank you for that. And yes, like Lucine said, it is available at the library and on Hoopla as an audiobook. So I am going to go ahead and unmute Richard Beatty, who is our next speaker.
Oh, my.
And I'll let him share what his book is going to be.
I'll be able to use my share screen, I presume. I have a PowerPoint, the famous PowerPoint. Well, I told at the beginning, I said, it's going to be a tough act to follow, and I had no idea how tough. One quick story, since what the heck, we got a few minutes, on the body snatching. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the story of Frank Lloyd Wright. When he passed away, when he died, he was buried where he had instructed years and years before, and that was next to Mamah Chaney, who was his lover back in the day, and that ended very tragically. So he was remarried to Ogavana, and Ogavana didn't particularly care for Frank being in Wisconsin, so she sent a team and dug him up in the middle of the night. And the next morning when the folks came out, they went, Frank's gone. And he ended up in Arizona. So they did not eat his body as far as I know. All right, so on that note, okay, host disabled attendee share screen. I need to be able to share the screen. I see you've got a disable. Can you see that? Uh-oh. The look of perplexion. You muted yourself too, so. All right.
I should have switched it now, so you should be able to share. Okay.
There.
Technology.
All right, desktop. Let's see, here we go. Let's see if it works. And I do believe it is working. Hang on. Everybody can see the Architectural Heritage book cover, I presume. I hope you can. All right. Oh, wait a minute. Everybody hear me? All right, you're all set? That wasn't that smooth. This is, of course, I guess a famous book in Genesee County. Many of our participants today have this book in their collection. It is, of course, the Architectural Heritage of Genesee County. The cover of it is quite lovely, and it is actually a photograph of a cross-stitch quilt entitled View from the Richmond Mansion, which I presume you could step outside of the library and see this same view today. Was stitched by a woman by the name of Verna Oler, if I hope I pronounced that correctly. The book was an effort spearheaded by Catherine Roth, and she was very instrumental in the formation of the Landmark Society. I will offer a disclaimer for this presentation. I am the current president of the Landmark Society. It is, I'm sure some people go, it's still around? Well, you know, we're on hiatus, I guess, but we'll be back. And we're not dead yet, Lucine. So, all right. And if anyone at the conclusion of this presentation wants to obtain a copy of this book, I know where they can get a brand spanking new volume of this book, because we have some still. All right. Catherine was a wonderful individual, and she wrote this, I thought, beautiful preface, and I'm going to just read a portion of it. Oh, before I do that, she enlisted local photographers, notably John King, Sharon and Don Burkle, and Harold Harold Kilthoff. I believe he's from Darien. And I'm sure they took hundreds, if not thousands, of photographs for this. And Catherine writes, the Architectural Heritage of Genesee County is a photographic documentary of architectural styles in Genesee County beginning in the 19th century. It was a companion or a follow-up to the history of Genesee County from 1890 to 1982, and that was published by the officially appointed historians of Genesee County in 1985. I have a feeling Larry Barnes may have had something to do with that, and I'm remiss in not knowing the gentleman who's our current county historian. The buildings inside the book reflect all kinds of types of structures. We have log cabins, there's houses, stone houses, etc. The materials used in the houses and buildings were primarily clay, made into bricks. So of course, plenty of lumber here in the Genesee Valley and in Genesee County. Quarries, many quarries were cut for limestone, and then of course, farmers in their field dug up many, many, many tons of cobblestone. So you'll see a lot of cobblestone houses. But she goes on to say, architecture is an art form subject to change, and few of the structures shown here exist just as they were built. Small, well-proportioned houses can become unbalanced by bulky additions. Larger houses are divided into multiple apartments. When something wears out, it is often replaced with a different fabric or discarded. Over time, many of the Genesee County's architectural gems have been abandoned or wantonly destroyed. It is still possible to recognize original design intent by identifying elements that remain. The Landmark Society of Genesee County has produced this book to encourage the recognition of architecture as an art form that should be maintained and enjoyed. The Society also wishes to give future generations a glimpse of the county as it existed in the late the 20th century. This book was published in, I believe, 1989. Catherine presented it as a book sandwiched in at that time, and she did it again in, I think, 2005. So interesting. Anyway, the Society wants to, promote the appreciation of the architecture that we live in and the architecture that we shop in and that we experience art in. All right, and here we see, of course, the Newberry Building, which is across the street from what once a collection of 18th and 19th century, I guess 19th century buildings, which was torn down during urban renewal in the 60s and 70s, the 70s primarily. So there's the Newberries. I'm sure some of our folks here shop there. Then it became Main Street Coffee, and adjacent to that was Pieces. Tom and April Stringham operated inside that building. And Main Street Coffee, a nice shot at night. And then today, Eli Fish, Matt Gray and Company won a landmark award in 2018, completely gutted the building and installed a brewery, which I'm all for that. It's great food, a couple of restaurants, Eden, of course, and forget the other one, oh darn it. But anyway, so this is architecture moving forward in time and using the bones that were there to keep them going. There you go, Lucine, bones. And of course, this is Catherine Roth, one of triplets, at one time the oldest surviving triplets in the United States, I do believe. Catherine is way over to your left, and her two sisters, I believe one just passed away this past year. Catherine will turn 100 on August the 23rd, so that's cool. We'll all have to sing happy birthday on Zoom to her, I guess. I asked Bill Kaufman because Bill knew Catherine as well as anyone, certainly as well as anyone I know, and this was his quote on Catherine. "Ah, Catherine, the woman who taught me to swim, and then the first time she met Lucine said, 'Your husband was the worst student I ever had.'" Catherine and her two sisters were, according to those who kept track of such things, the oldest living triplets on record. The first died at 98, the second died very recently at 99, and Catherine will be, as I said, 100 on the 23rd. In Bill's estimation, Catherine was one of the greatest Batavians, a woman whose civic undertaking ranged from historic preservation. She was one of the most passionate voice, I can't believe I did that. There we go. One of the passionate voice in Batavia. She taught swimming, and she was on the city council. And Bill says, concluding, a great, great lady. So I'm going to go through a couple of entries from the book. This is a house on Ledge Road in South Alabama. And you can see at the time this was photographed by John King in 1987, not in real great shape. You can see the bones of it, you can see the structure of it. And so I was just kind of poking around on the internet, and I found the house some years later. Certainly no landscape to go along with it, but they took that house and they fixed it up, by gosh, and they're keeping that house alive for someone who may want to, fix it up in a different way. And you can't do that if you tear them down. So congrats to those people. All right. This one was a landmark award in 2010. And this is a photograph taken in 1987 of the house. So you can see what a great job, I believe it was the Paul family. Oh, I'm sorry. Carney was the folks that did the restoration on this. Conveyed the house to the Courts family. It's 87 and all this. I mean, the amount of information in this book is just phenomenal. Going through all the records to get, who bought the land, how long ago they built on the land, what type of structure it was, all the various details you really need to know about the structure. This is the house as it existed at the time of the award in 2010. Shrubbery has grown in, but the house is still doing quite fine. This is a house in Elba. I'm sure Lucine is quite familiar with this house. I love the inscription on the right. The plasterers wrote their name, which was Carson and Reynolds, October 20th, 1887. So they did the plaster work on the inside of the house. This is on Chapel Street in Oakfield, photographed by Mr. Kilthow in 1987. And there's the house today. It was a 2001 Landmark Award, and you can see what a tremendous job they've done with that. I know for sure I don't want to be the one that has to repaint that, because that's why we have professional painters. I do believe there's a lot of work involved in that, and wonderful folks that have done this and kept that house alive. Down over in Stafford on your way to Leroy, here from Batavia, there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful houses there in the little settlement. This one is at 6233 Main Road. I just love the sort of the Greek look to it. It's kind of a massive, almost like an addition on the right-hand side. And that was a 03 award to Barbara Morris. Here's a detailed shot of the front of that house. Looks like it might be, you could decorate those for Christmas perhaps as they get a little bigger. All right, and I'm sure folks here in Batavia are familiar with this odd structure. It was a gas storage facility built in, I believe, what does it say, 1855. And they actually made gas from coal, which is not a very environmentally proper way to do that, but that's the technology of the day. So gas was stored in there, and then gas was distributed through lines in the street to light the street lights, and eventually fire the stoves and all that. It ceased production in 1878. So this building its original use ceased to exist in 100, you do the math, a long, long time ago. So this building sat, and I'm sure it deteriorated. And then finally, in this century, the 21st century, Dana Lamb came along and converted a gas storage facility, imagine that, into a doctor's office. And she won the Landmark Award for 2005. Terrific job. I've never actually been inside the building, but when the photographs were taken, lots and lots of interesting shots from the inside. You can imagine the shapes of the rooms inside because of the necessity of the very round building. All right, here's a shot of a house. Folks that drive up and down Route 5 may be familiar. Right out in front of the quarry is an old, I guess it's, what do we call the style? Greek style house. Great bones, built out of the quarried material, wood frame structure around it. And unfortunately, this is one of the ones that has not been worked on in a long time. I took a photograph and I was really trying to capture the two vultures that were circling over the quarry. I thought it would have been very appropriate if I could get them to circle over this one. As the roof is caving in, there's a tree growing up on the other side. Not what we would like to see happen to, more buildings in Genesee County, because ultimately this will be torn down or it will fall down. Now, does anybody recognize this one? That was the Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was on the east side of town, and I was actually out coming back from photographing that dilapidated structure in front of the quarry, and I thought, I really want to know what's going on there. And there was a gentleman, I didn't catch his name, 65 years old, working on this building. Of course, it was a 1969 addition to the Batavia landscape. I'm not sure what year they moved to the west side of town. It's probably this century, I'm guessing. I'm not real sure. It's been through a couple of iterations, and now it is going to be another hair salon. The entire front is going to be done in the brick that you see there. So it's a great example of not just historic buildings, but any building has worth. And if you can reinvent that building and create something new with it, then I think it's great. I think it's better than tearing something down and putting up one of those god-awful pole barns. So there. So that's the book. Like I said, there are many copies available. You can purchase those at the Holland Land Office. I'm not sure where else. If I had my notes together, I would tell you, but please contact us. There's our website. Brother Dave is in charge of that. So if you have any complaints about that, he's shaking his head. Anyway, I just logged onto it. It does work. So there it is, landmarkgenesee.org. Check it out, and any questions, just shoot us a message. So thank you. All done.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. And let's see. All right. So we are back to our video screen here. And that book is also available at the library to check out if anybody's interested. We have a few reference copies and then a few that you can actually take out. So stop by the reference desk if you're ever interested in that. Let's see. Okay, so our fourth and final presenter today is going to be Frances McNulty, and I will let her tell you about her book. Actually, let's make sure she can unmute first.
Okay.
There you are. Okay.
So thank you, Samantha. And as she just said, I am Frances McNulty. I'm a member of this Book Sandwiched In committee, and now this Lunchtime Book Chats program. I'm a friend of the Richmond Library, and I serve on the board of the Friends. I always like to give a little plug for the Friends, which is a support group that promotes and contributes to the library and its programs. I know many of you here today, and I know that many of you are members of the group, for which we thank you. There are, hopefully, when the library is back up to normal, there are volunteer opportunities, and it's a nice association of people. So the book I will be reviewing is titled Furious Hours, Murder, Fraud, and the Last Trial of Harper Lee. I was already reading this book when Sam asked me to fill in this last slot because she needed another presenter. So I told her I didn't have time to read another one, so this is what you're getting today. And I apologize to Nora. She's going to have to talk about it tomorrow at our book group, so she can rate how we did today. So that's how we came upon it. My book group chose this as its next discussion. The author is Casey Sepp. She has been a contributor to the New Yorker magazine, the New York Times, and the New Republic. Furious Hours is her first book. She was born and still lives on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. She graduated from Harvard with a degree in English and subsequently earned a master's degree in theology at Oxford, having attended as a Rhodes Scholar, which is quite an honor. The book was released in May of 2019, and it debuted as number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list. and the Times included it as one of the 100 notable books of 2019. Online, there were several, I saw a very good interview with the author where she was doing a author's visit at a bookstore in Brooklyn, and it was very good. It gave you a nice feel for her personality, and she was very personable. The story includes themes relating to the South and civil rights, specifically in a small town in Alabama in the 1960s, the unsolved murders of under mysterious circumstances, the involvement of a young liberal attorney, and the investigation by a world-famous author whose intentions were to write a book about the events. The book is categorized as nonfiction and includes a wonderful bibliography of the reference sources used in the citations to document the facts. But it reads like a story and might in fact be considered narrative nonfiction. It might be on that list. The author relies on primary sources, including newspaper articles, personal interviews, court and public records, but uses a technique that arranges them to tell a fascinating story rather than reading like a newspaper account or a magazine article. The book consists of 3 separate sections, each featuring one of the characters. And these are the Reverend, the lawyer, and the writer. Each section is distinctly separate, but the author provides a well-crafted merger of the 3 and creates an intriguing tale in the process. The Reverend is Willie Maxwell, a handsome and dapper Black man living in the small town of Alexander City, Alabama. He is a decorated military veteran who served in Vietnam. He returned home to Alabama, became involved in various business interests. In addition to his business savvy, he became a respected and charismatic preacher. He marries for the first time, and his wife is eventually found dead under mysterious circumstances. And although he is charged with the murder, he is exonerated. He subsequently marries again, and that spouse meets a similar fate. Other relatives die, including a brother and a nephew. In all, 5 family members meet their demise. And if you can believe it, he acquired a 3rd wife. Would any of us dare to become married to this man? Not I. Of special interest is the fact that each had life insurance policies that named Willie Maxwell as the beneficiary. And the policies had, in fact, been applied for and purchased by him. I did not even know that someone could apply for and buy insurance policy on another person without their knowledge or consent. But apparently it was relatively easy, and enrollment forms were available in newspapers and magazines. The payout on these policies to the Reverend Maxwell certainly led to his being suspicious and contributed to his look of guilt. And it is not a spoiler to tell you that the Reverend eventually met his own demise. Part 2 is the lawyer, who is Tom Radney. He is a liberal, equal rights advocate who becomes acquainted with the Reverend and defends his entitlement to collect the benefits of the various life insurance policies for a fee, of course. He also became a candidate for public office, eventually running for Lieutenant Governor of Alabama. Part 3 is the author. And the author is Nell Harper Lee, who's famous for the Pulitzer Prize winning novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. She herself was from Alabama, and this section on Lee was my favorite, detailing many facts about her life and career, including her relationship with the author Truman Capote and their work together on the novel In Cold Blood, of which Lee had a significant role assisting in his research and compiling notes, traveling with him to Kansas, and so on. I don't believe she ever got any credit or anything listed for that effort, but she was very instrumental in the book. These 3 characters are eventually woven together in a well-crafted way and the author has a knack for ending each chapter with a thought or suggestion, making the reader curious about what's next to come. Other interesting themes include the influence of voodoo, of which the Reverend is thought to have been involved. There was a prevalence for voodoo in the South, and it came with Black culture and New Orleans, voodoo was a big deal. Oftentimes, the title of a book is very apparent, and other times I find myself wondering about its significance. These furious hours were enigmatic until very late in the book, but were adequately explained. The section on Harper Lee detailed her personal struggles subsequent to the success and fame she encountered after To Kill a Mockingbird, including her efforts to create another book and the pressures she experienced to do so, which became a factor here. The events in Alabama involving Reverend Maxwell were the intended theme of her efforts to write this second book, but alas, it did not materialize. This remains the object of much speculation, and the hopes of reading a manuscript is elusive and will probably never happen. There were efforts to try to find this mysterious manuscript. Her despair and depression and the stress she encountered evoked my sympathy and compassion and provided understanding of her tendency toward reclusiveness, refusing to grant interviews and make appearances, and avoiding publicity. I rarely choose nonfiction, but I'm glad I did this time, and I can say I enjoyed this book. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Frances. That book is also available at the library in regular print, large print, and audio, and it is available on Overdrive as an ebook if anyone's interested in reading it. So let me see. Thank you very much for coming today. There were more bodies than I anticipated, but that's okay. In several of our books. Next week, we will hear about 3 fiction titles and 1 nonfiction title. So we're looking forward to that. I'll send out an email, of course, with all of that information if you've registered. So keep an eye out for that. And before we go, does anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to make? No? All right, well, thank you to our presenters today. It was all very informative. I did definitely learn things that I didn't expect to, so that's always good to get out of these presentations. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of what seems to be a sunny day. I haven't been outside, but enjoy it, and hopefully we can see you next week.